My name is Maria, and this is my testimony. So when I was 22 years old, I was diagnosed with spindle cell sarcoma. Usually that cancer develops in the bone and the soft tissues. But for me, it came to develop in my left breast. Brielle Isabella was born November 21st, 2014, and 2 weeks after that, I felt the mass, and I remember going to the clinic. When I got to the clinic, so they told me that we were gonna wait another month and wait to see. And I remember a nurse that did the sonogram at the time told my doctor that we were not gonna wait a whole month. So she was an angel then, starting the whole process. She's like, we gotta send her to get the mammogram done right now. So I went, I got the mammogram, and there they found out that it was something. They still didn't know if it was cancerous, malignant, or not. So when they did the actual mammogram, they saw that it was a huge mass. The mass was about 8.5 centimeters and 7.5 centimeters, right? By May, the mass had grown to a 10.10 centimeter. It was a huge mass, and they realized that it was a stage 3 cancer. June 6, 2015, I underwent a lumpectomy, basically surgery to remove the mass on the left breast. During the surgery, they noticed no necrosis was found, that the margins were clean, and there was no depth around the cancerous mass. Basically, the rest of the area around where the mass was clean. It was good. I went to the radiation doctor, and we had a meeting. When we had that meeting, he read all the papers, like from all the, exams that they had done, and they saw that it was a rare cancer. One out of a million women get it, especially not at my age. I was 22. So they saw I had 3 small babies, and they were trying to attack it the most aggressive way they could. So they did 36 rounds of the radiation. During the radiation, my breast was on fire. It was literally burnt from the radiation. September 28, 2015 started my first cycle of chemotherapy, which was the ifosfamide and the doxorubicin. There was a total of 4 sessions of chemo, and it was every 3 weeks. That chemo, they called it the Red Devil because I had to be isolated. I couldn't be around nobody. I remember my first session of the chemo, my kid's father took my babies to see me the first day. And I remember when he got up there, Briella was probably 9 months old. Brian was 4. Brianna was 3. And I remember that the doctors ran in, and they told him that they couldn't be there. That they couldn't be there because it was too aggressive and it could affect them. So he had to go back down with them, and he had to leave. I couldn't see them being in the hospital 5 days straight. Usually in the hospital, when I had to go in, I would be there by myself because my kid's father used to go in at 5 in the morning and then pick up the kids from school, feed them, dress them, do everything with them, and then he would come to the hospital like around 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. 12 o'clock midnight. So basically I was by myself the whole time. And then I remember the second round came around, and when I did the second chemo, I remember the second day of my stay, I told the nurses I had a mental breakdown. I told the nurses I didn't want to be in the hospital anymore, to give me my papers, that I wanted to leave, just because I didn't want to be there. I missed my babies. I couldn't be with them, so I didn't want to be there. And the nurse told me that if I'm willing to leave, then that means I'm willing to die at all costs, and I don't care about nobody else. So she told me it's either you leave, you get your papers, or you stay and you do what's right, which is, do the medicine. So then I'm like, she's like, you want to see your kids grow? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, then you got to do what you have to do. And I remember saying, all right. So I stayed. Every day before I go into the chemo, to do the chemo, to start the cycle, which was the 5 days straight, I remember telling whoever was dropping me off that day that I had to drop me off an hour earlier, just so that I can read my Bible and pray, because I hated the feeling that I felt in the hospital. I had depression, bad depression. I didn't want to see nobody. I had suicidal thoughts. I didn't want to live anymore. It was a bad feeling. So I remember knowing, because I was raised in knowing God. I mean, my parents weren't consistent, but I had a grandma that taught us what it was to worship, what it was to pray, what it was to be faithful, what it was that even if we were going through the hardest times, that he would be there. Even if we don't feel him at the moment, he's there. So I turned to what I knew best, was the word and praying. I can't say I felt him during that process. Reading the Bible, I can't say that, but I remember telling myself in the process that I know he's listening, and I didn't want to give the devil, I didn't want to make him feel like he's got authority over whatever was going on. I want him to believe that I want him to know that whatever I was going through, at the end of the day, I know I was going to come out of it because God was on my side. In the process, I didn't feel it. I was totally lost. But I would read my Bible for a whole hour, I would pray, and then I had to go in and admit myself to the hospital. I remember every time I would admit, the first day would go by fine. The second day, then it came the third day, the depression hit. I didn't want to see nobody. I didn't want to be around nobody. I remember putting the song Spirit Break Out, and I used to put it by my ear so it can be louder than the thoughts that were in my head. And I would just sing the song over and over, not having no feeling of nothing. I didn't know. And so when I would leave, I would go home to my baby, still lost, because when you're isolated by yourself so many days, you come out into the real world and you don't know, you're like, what's going on? And then 3 weeks later, go back in and isolate myself again. And the whole process, because their dad had to take care of the kids. My mom was helping. My mom was working as well. So I had a strong support system. But, at the time when I was going through where I was going through, I felt alone. But I know throughout that whole process that God was there. So throughout that whole process, I was trying to get closer to the Lord. And the Lord knew my desire to be closer to him, to know more of him, and to do his will always in my life. And because I had kids too that I wanted to, growing up, know that it was going to be hard, but he's one that would keep us. In that process, the Lord was teaching me of what it was to be alone, of how it felt to be alone. He was teaching me that even if I didn't feel him, he was there. That's what he was teaching me in the moment, that even if I didn't feel him, he was there. I was alone, but in reality, I wasn't alone. He was just teaching me of what that felt like and how to deal with what that felt like. So if I were to ever, so he was preparing me for what was to come. My mom, Victoria, she adopted me when I was a newborn. She adopted my brother when he was 9 months old, because my real mom which is her sister, was a drug addict, so was in the streets, doing what she wasn't, supposed to. I have a brother and a sister, Kevin and Anisha, and I'm the baby. So it's Kevin, Anisha, Jose, and me. My brother Jose and me, we were adopted by Vicky, which is my real mom's sister. Vicky's my aunt. She did the best she could in raising us with love, knowing of the Word of God, having the fear of the Lord. Yes, she wasn't consistent, but she raised us with what she knew, what my grandma instilled in her. Every weekend we would stay at my grandma's house, me and Jose, because that's who we love to be with. And my grandma was the one that taught me more about the Lord and worship, and what it was to have a devotion with Him, what it was to walk with Him, what it was to know that He's the only one that can fill whatever it is whatever void or whatever we may be going through. He's the only one that can fill in. He's the only one that can take us through it. So that's how I came to know who the Lord was. So growing up, I never felt loved just because I was adopted, I always questioned why I was given up and why me and my brother had to go through this. My mom did the best that she could. Vicky did the best. She did the best that she could. It's not like she had favoritism, but she had my sister, then she had one of her own, and she tried to be equal in everything. She tried to do the best that she knew how with what she had. But I always felt like I wasn't loved, I wasn't wanted. So I always tried to search for that sense of acceptance and love and home, my own home, So then I met the father of my kids at the age of 15. I had my son at 16. He saved my life. And then we had Brianna and we had Briella, just because I wanted my own home. I was doing it all wrong just because I wanted to get out and have my own family. But throughout the cancer process, what I was going through, the Lord was teaching me that there's no human alive, there's no material, there's no nothing that can replace His love or His companionship or His friendship or Him, They can replace Him. He's the only one that can make you feel loved, that whatever you're missing, He can be that. Whatever you need, He can do it. So the Lord was teaching me because He knew the pedestal that the father of my kids was in. So the Lord knew that to break me, I had to go through certain situations in life, and that was the whole cancer. Because the Lord knew my desire, because it's what I was raised with, what I knew, So the Lord knew my desire was to live for Him. Now I have kids, so now my focus was shifted to wanting to give them a better life. So I didn't want the history to repeat itself. So He knew my desire. He knew my desire and what I wanted, and was to live for Him, and was to teach my kids to live for Him throughout any circumstance. So I remember I was, I started doing what I wanted to do. We never got married. We did things the wrong way. We never got married. We never sought any counsel from nobody. We never, we used to pray here and there and teach our kids, but we weren't living it. We were living in fornication, doing what we're not supposed to. So I remember sitting and after every time, and begging to the Lord, telling Him that if it was His will for me and the father of my kids to be together, that He would make it happen. It would be the right way, and we would get married, and we would go to church, and we will teach our kids, and we will stop everything that doesn't please the Lord. We will do the Lord's will. But if not, if it was, then He can make it happen. But if it wasn't, to remove him from my life. So he wasn't a bad person. He was a great father. He was great to me. He was a provider. He tried the best with what he can. He also has his own traumas and his own stories. So he did the best that he could with what he knew and what he wanted different. So the Lord put me through the cancer, through the whole hospital stay, through the depression, through suicide. I'm not saying he put me through it, but He allowed for it to happen because He knew that I needed to learn the lesson of what it was to be alone, because I didn't know. I wanted just to have someone there to listen to me, to, you know, to have someone there with me. So the Lord was teaching me that He's the only one that can fulfill everything that I need. Me and the father of my kids, before we had kids, we were just living our life. But when we had Brian, my son, we wanted to do what we knew was best for them. And so we wanted to start a church. We wanted to start going to church. His cousin told us about a church. And that was the cathedral, because it was an English church, and that's what we wanted, an English church. What I love about that church the most is the way that they put kids first. Like, for them, it's important that the kids know you're never too small or too young to be able to experience the Spirit of the Lord. And they really take their time to teach them about the Word, to teach them about how it is to walk in holiness, how to be righteous, how to love the Word. They teach a lot about the Bible, how to love the Word. They teach them how to do devotions. They teach them. So they put the kids first. Like, I love that about that church. And that's what kept me in that church. So when I was going through my chemo, I remember, the church. Oh my goodness, the church. I remember the way that they, were sending food to my house. Always a call. They were always calling, telling me that they were praying for me. And when I remember when I would go to the church without nothing and I was bald, how everybody would like, bro, you look great. And they would just try and hype me up and make me feel good. And the love for my kids still to this day. I'm so grateful for the cathedral, for pastor. So that's what I love about the church, that we're one big family. When one person goes through something, we know that everybody around there is just, we're sticking together and we're pushing through. And the faith, when two or more, like in the Bible it says, when two or more there, gathered together, He is there. And that's exactly in that moment of my life, I felt that. I felt that I was going through what I was going through, but I know I had people that were praying for me, and not only me, my family, my kids, the father of my kids. I've always told the Lord, I just don't know how to get it across. I've always told the Lord I wanted to, with my testimony, be able to talk to those young parents that are probably have gone through the same situation I've gone, starting family at such a young age and doing things not in the will of the Lord. So I want to encourage all the parents and the soon-to-be parents that this is the only way in teaching your kids about the Lord. And not only teaching them, talking and talking and talking, but being about it, being the example in their lives, in everything that you do, and not only in your children's life, but in all those that surround you, your family, your co-workers, that it's in showing those people out there what He has been to me. And whatever you're going through He could be that for you too. So that's what I want to say with this story, that if He did it for me, He can also do it for you. But it takes sacrifice, and it takes daily sacrifice. It takes daily prayer. It takes daily walk. It's not just waiting for when something bad happens. I say I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna leave it. It's when everything is also good. So through this whole process that I've gone through in my life, what He's taught me is that He is everything to me, and He's the only one that can be that. And if you let Him in, He can be all that for you. To the addicts, to the parents, or to the ones feeling lonely, to the ones feeling like they just want to end their life, the Lord is capable of healing that wound. Or to any of those out there that have traumas from their childhood or are still carrying burdens from their childhood, understand that if you leave it at His feet, genuinely from your heart, He will listen and He will heal it. He will make it happen. Because I tell you one thing, if it hadn't been for the Lord in my life, I don't think I would be able to be half the mother I am today. I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. But I do say that I leave it to Him daily. Daily, every second and every minute that I can. I leave it to Him. And I let Him be the voice in me. I let Him speak through me when it comes to my children, to my family. And those who are not walking with Him won't understand where you're coming from. But if you still do it because the Lord is telling you to do it, one day they'll run into something that they'll remember that one word you gave them. And they'll remember where it came from, which is what happened with me. It all took my grandma, my abuelita mami, to teach us of what it was to walk with the Lord in prayer. Mommy had no idea what I was going to go through in my life. She had no idea I was going to get cancer. She had no idea I was going to get pregnant at the age 16. She had no idea that I was going to leave my home and not do it right. Every day she would say, "Are you going to get married?" She had no idea none of this was going to happen. But she did tell me one thing. There's only one that can help you. And there's only one that can fill you. I didn't understand that at that moment. But going through isolation, through my chemo, I learned that He is everything. And still to this day, He is everything I ever needed. I know that if I'm depressed, if I have anxiety, if I'm just heartbroken, or if I just feel, yes, heartbroken, but if I just feel like it's not gonna happen, I know who I can turn to. When it feels impossible, like my kids growing up, becoming teenagers, one in middle school, one about to go to middle school, and one that's going to third grade. For me, it feels impossible for them to see it with my eyes that they can be the light in their school. It's impossible because of how heavy it is out there in the world. But I know that if I leave it to Him, He will make the work through them. You know, I know because He's taught me through all my life that if I leave it in His hands, He can make it happen.